Welcome to the EOcafe, where the EO community meet. Now we're back in the office again this time, which is nice. We hope to have a fairly large audience because we're talking about great, and there was a great meeting here today. But unfortunately, we had another meeting afterwards, so they haven't been able to join us. But we are joined by two very distinguished guests from the Commission, Jean Doussard and Franz Imler, who are sitting the other side of the screen. I'm afraid because of the change in arrangements, we haven't got a camera on them. But if we do this another time, which I certainly hope we will, we'll make sure we'll have a camera on the audience as well. So today we're going to talk for a second time about the subject of data spaces. And it's a little bit unusual because I'm joined in hosting this meeting. I'm joined by a co-host. You probably know Veronica, who's sitting next to me, Veronica Barejo, who is also leading the ERSC effort in GREAT. And so it means that I shall have a quieter afternoon, which will be nice. I should be able to sit back a bit and not be sort of so intense because I find it quite an intense process. Just a reminder of the EOcafe rules. It's an informal meeting. We're happy for you to keep cameras on. It's great to see you, but please keep your microphone off unless I specifically ask you to join in, or my co-host Veronica asks you to join in the discussion. If you want to join in, please put a question or a comment into the chat, and we will then pick it up and ask you to join in the discussion. So that's basically it. Now, I mentioned we have two guests live with us, but we also have two guests for the EOcafe, who are our sorry guys, our real guests. For the cafe, we have Johan Bodenkamp, who is in the Commission in DG Connect, and we have Monica Krashenovsky, who is with CloudFarrow, is the business development officer at CloudFarrow. And maybe at this point, I just ask you just to introduce yourselves, just say a bit about yourselves. I'll come back to the subject in a minute, and Veronica will say a few words. But would you just like to introduce yourselves? Monica, perhaps first.
Thank you very much. So Monika Krzyżanowska. Let's start from the beginning. I am a seismologist, a physicist by education, but by what I'm doing, I am in a space observation and business development at CloudFarrow. But here in particular, I am in a character of participants of Copernicus data space ecosystem. Because CloudFarrow is one of the is a member of a consortium that is developing and operating this service.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that as we go on. Johan.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I hope that everybody has coffee and tea. My name is Johan Bodenkamp. I'm indeed working at the European Commission, DG Connect, and I'm working in this data policy and innovation unit. So it's all about data here. We have put forward this European data strategy, launching this idea of creating common European data spaces. And I'm the project officer of the GREAT project. And I'm also dealing a lot with the Data Spaces Support Center that has been set up in this context. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. So, and maybe Veronica, I should have asked you if you want to say something.
Oh yes, of course. I mean, maybe just about
yourself.
About myself. Oh my gosh, I wasn't prepared for that.
No,
but that's okay.
That's
okay. So thank you very much, Jeff, for introducing me and allowing me to be a part of this EOcafe. So indeed, as you mentioned, I am I have a pleasure to be a part of the ERSC team. I'm a project manager in ERSC for several years already. And as of the topic of today, we have a pleasure to be a part of the GREAT project, which Johan also mentioned, developing the Green Deal data space, and that's what that will be the starting point of our discussion today about the data spaces.
So Veronica is clearly our expert on data spaces, so it was much appropriate, and I very much appreciate that she joins me and helps me with some of the jargon and the technical issues. So We have talked about data spaces before. We had an EOcafe where I was talking with Yuri Robrecht back in January. He explained about the motivation to create a single market in data alongside those for goods and services and people. So the overall European single market. It's seen as a strong part of the implementation of the European data strategy in order to help create this single market for data in Europe. And we talked about how data spaces were a solution for that. So today, really want to take that discussion on further, to dive in deeper. There's a lot of data spaces that seem to have been announced, in my understanding. I hope to learn more about this. Some 200 data spaces have been announced by European players, European actors. And within this veritable explosion, we see a lot of opportunity for the EO services industry and a lot of relevance for the EO services industry, because EO data is one of the largest data sets, one of the richest data sets available. So within ERSC, some see this as a big opportunity, but we also understand some people see it as a threat. It's disruptive, it changes maybe their business models. So these are sorts of things that we'd like to address. Veronica, what's your perception on that?
Yes, thank you very much, Jeff. So indeed, we already had a discussion about data spaces as a kind of introduction of the concept, I think, with Yori these few months ago. However, there are so many questions still. And for instance, when even for GREAT, we're having discussions with our future community of practice, but also we had a pleasure to discuss with our ERSC community, with our members as a part of Expandio, of the workshop we organized, but also we had numerous webinars and stakeholder forum. We discussed with the community. And there are still similar questions about the impact of data spaces on the data ownership, on the businesses which are based on data, on where to go with your data as a data provider or as a data producer. So I think that, and even the fact that, as you mentioned, there are so many initiatives already launched by the Commission, but also all the other ones. There are national, regional, privately owned data spaces that only adds up to this confusion. So we thought that as we are a part of this ecosystem through the Green Deal data space and through the GREAT project, it would be nice to have this follow-up discussion today and answer some of these questions. I mean, actually ask them to Johan and Monica to brainstorm a little bit on that. And of course, the other thing which I wanted to mention is, because yes, we have our two guests today representing two, I think, very relevant pillars for our Earth observation sector, pillars of this data space ecosystem, because we have common European data spaces, which will be the biggest ecosystem of data space and this pillar of data spaces in Europe, because we're not talking about one data space, we're talking about all the data spaces created within this framework. But also Copernicus data space ecosystem, which by itself is a different, but also a pretty big creature, and again relevant for us as the Earth observation sector. And what I also wanted to mention is that we're focusing today on these two, but maybe just to have a little disclaimer, we know that there are many more data spaces which are also potentially relevant for our sector and for our community. This is just the start of the discussion. We just thought that would be nice to start with these two, but we're not closing. It's not like this is the only topic and these are the only data spaces that we're discussing. So I think
it gives me a lot of questions to ask
already.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
But I mean, like, I don't know if you want to.
No. Let's let our guest speak.
Yes, exactly. So I think kind of explain yourself here, because indeed we invited these two, as I said, pillars, but this is only our, let's say, semantics on that. But maybe shortly, just for the ones who are not aware, and maybe to demystify the concepts, Johan, if maybe you could start with just saying, what are the common European data spaces? What is it all about? What is the goal of this whole initiative? Yes, what is it?
Okay, thank you very much. So the Common European Data Spaces is, let's say, a type of data space that we have put forward in the European Data Strategy of February 2020. Indeed, there is a lot of activity out there. The data economy has started well before 2020, obviously, and data space initiatives or data space-like initiatives already existed before. The European Data Strategy is trying to bring this one or two steps further, indeed, by creating this notion of common European on top of the data spaces concept. So the data spaces, in a nutshell, is really combining a functional data infrastructure that allows you technically to find data, to pull data, to share data, not a central database, of course, but in a federated, distributed way. And together, on top of that, to have a functional so-called data governance mechanism, that is to say, the whole set of rules that allows you to understand under what conditions you could access the data, share the data, reuse the data. So it is to be seen as an infrastructure with the set of rules like we know our road system in the physical world, right? We know all the roads that we build in Europe, in the world, connected together, allowing us to go by bike, by plane, by car, by lorry. We all learn as a kid how to, what are the rules? You stop when it's red, you go when it's green, you know that you need a driving license when you have a car, etc. So, I mean, it's maybe a very simple image, but on the other hand, for those that are not acquainted with data spaces, we see that it's still very abstract and that it's, which is logical, it is abstract indeed, you cannot really catch it or see it, but this is basically what it means, but then in the data world. Now, common European data spaces, again, would mean that you have data spaces that go beyond the borders, obviously, that at a certain point in time, in an ideal situation, you would have a data space that covers the whole of the EU 27 and maybe even beyond, but let's stay in Europe for the moment because it's already a big endeavor. And with the European data strategy, in order to start that, and the idea of creating these common European data spaces was launched in a certain number of sectors, of domains that are of strategic economic interest for Europe, or very important from a public administration point of view. So in the European data strategy, let's say 10 European common data space sectors and domains were announced. That was 3 years ago, and in the meantime, another 4 have been added. Now, the common European data spaces as such are not the end goal, because you already said it at the beginning. The vision put forward in the European data strategy is at a certain point to arrive at this so-called internal market for data, so that you really have the data flowing freely across borders, across sectors. Meaning also that obviously these common European data spaces, when they start being developed and grow, that they will be interconnected, and that data will be part of different kinds of data spaces, because of course there will be some, let's say, overlap, because important data sets will be important for different kind of sectors. So let's say that in a nutshell is what we mean by common European data spaces. This data infrastructure together with a set of rules at European scale in various sectors that have been announced in the European data strategy.
Thank you very much. I think it's already very nice, Johan, that you already mentioned the definition, which I think we also could a little bit emphasize here, because I think that what is confusing about data space is also the fact that for some of people who are maybe not, and stakeholders who are not involved in this ecosystem, it's a little bit unclear. We already have so many data platforms and so many data sources, but it's not the same. As you said, it's an infrastructure just connecting them. It's not, and I think what Gaia X I think defined as well is that you're not physically uploading the data there. It's just facilitating the exchange, the transactions, as a data space support center named that. So I think this is also relevant to mention here. And with that, and especially as we mentioned the definition, I wanted to go then to Copernicus data space ecosystem, because exactly how are you then guys fitting into this definition and this idea of creating single market for data?
Okay, I am unmuted. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
I understand that this question is for me. Yes.
Yes, of course. Sorry. Yes, Monica, please.
So I think that again, it would be good to start a little bit, to go a little bit backward, because traditionally we know what it was about the data. We have a data storage, data somewhere people are accessing, and then we have this. Essentially, we try to reverse this traditional logic, saying that we go to the data, to more or less central storage. We said this central storage, in fact, can be distributed, and it can be distributed in various organizations. So this is the first approach. The second important thing, I'm sorry, I'm coming to Copernicus also, of course, but the second important thing is I like very much this parallel to building roads. We also use parallel of data being the new oil. Not because, well, of course, because there is so much business potential behind, but as well because if you don't process it, you can't really use it. Like you can't really use, or you could use roads by walking on them, but basically you need cars, you need something for it. So again, you have to process the data to get information. And Copernicus and Copernicus data space ecosystem is a particular potential use case of a data space. I say potential because there is a lot of data, but this data is free. Yes, it's available under certain conditions that you refer to European Union, but basically you can use them, you can access them, and they are meant to be used. So we have this situation with big amount of data. You will notice that we don't say that we are building now Copernicus data space, but we are building Copernicus data space ecosystem, because by saying data space, we say we want this infrastructure and governance to comply with European Data Act, with European rules, with open standards, and with governance. But at the same time, we want it to remain open and flexible, because data space are becoming now something quite well defined. With us, very soon we'll have set of rules, we'll have some governing body. So we stay within ecosystem to say we are open and everybody is free to join, of course, by adhering some regulation, some governance, but still it shouldn't be. We absolutely don't want it to be too rigid. At least, okay, we are implementing for what we are getting as policy agreed with ESA and EU. But this is a general approach to this concept. So we say we will federate as new user, because what is a data space? Data space means that you have several actors, you have several data providers, you have several maybe data users, you have services. Then you need to trust each other. Yes, so you need some software level that will enable you to validate those transactions, those exchange of data, or those use of data. I don't know, because it's a very complex. I think when you go a bit deeper, beside further than just saying we want to exchange data in a free, open, secure, and trustful and protected way, then you encounter many bigger and smaller challenges that are regulated on a general level right now, but the implementation is only coming. I think that Johan, you could probably give more detailed examples of how it is done in other data spaces that are maybe more mature, like health. In Copernicus data space ecosystem, we are still at the beginning, but maybe we'll come to it in a while.
The road network is quite an interesting analogy, isn't it? I mean, at the beginning, the roads, you always used to have somebody walking in front of the cars with a red flag, so they didn't go too fast and they weren't threatening others. You need rules for the use of the roads. You need signs, and which are universally understood now within a European single market. You need to maintain them, and that, of course, comes down to national priorities, and you need to ensure security, and there's a lot of debate around that. I guess it's still, you've said it's one road network, and I'm sort of left thinking, well, data spaces, they're interoperable, the data is supposed to be, you find it, you can discoverable. Why is it multiple data spaces and not one data space?
If I may,
is that a different question?
Yeah, exactly. We are at the very beginning of this endeavor. I think that's important to notice. We are really starting this process. We haven't built our road network in one day, not even in two, even less so at European level, where they all connect and where we agree also that the Dutch driver license is just as valuable as the Polish one, etc. So that's an important thing that to say, I think. The other thing that I wanted maybe to clarify or stress, given indeed Monica's explanations, is why do we come with this building of data spaces? Because we see that still a huge amount of data is untapped, is unused. There is really a lot of data that is being produced. I think everybody's aware of it, and it is more and more and more. However, there is still not so much data of that is really being used, shared, reused to create, of course, good product and services. So that's the ultimate goal, to really reap the benefits of data sharing, of everything that is out there. And that entails a huge amount of closed data, because Monica referred to open data. There's a lot of open data out there, and that's great. And we put a lot of efforts also, of course, in trying to stimulate that since years and years. But with the common European data spaces, or with data spaces, we also try to unclose, let's say in a certain way, the closed data, so that interested parties can more easily find the data, share it under certain conditions. So one of the important elements in a data space is that the data holder is in charge. That is to say, the data holder decides under what conditions, it can make the data available, under for what kind of compensation, money, financial, of course, but also other kinds of compensation, or not, because you have data altruism and all that. So I wanted to stress that. And why not immediately make one single data space? Well, because that's maybe a bit too complex immediately to go there. So we have had a communication in 2018 which had the title "Moving Towards a Single Data." Is what I don't know exactly by heart the title anymore, but something already like moving towards a single data space. There is a lot to be done, and so the idea in the data strategy that has been put forward is to work on two main elements, if I may say so. On the one hand, to work on this data governance mechanism from a EU legislation point of view, to complete the existing data legislation with certain elements in order to already provide, let's say at EU legislation level, an important part of the governance framework. And of course, then other elements are there as well. So of course, I'm referring to the DGA, the Data Governance Act, to the Data Act, to the Implementing Act on the High Value Data Sets. Those are the three, let's say, main deliverables. And on the other hand, to also really concretely support data space initiatives. And in order to do that, it was felt necessary to start by identifying important sectors for the EU economy, and to start by building first these data spaces in a certain number of sectors and domains of public interest. Yeah, so let's say to be felt like an important necessary step in order to get hopefully to this so-called single data space. But this also, we have seen in the last years, creates a lot of confusion. So I prefer speaking about the internal data market, with us being all part of the market that we know, with moving freely to Brussels and to Krakow. We know what it means, the internal market, and if we could realize that also at the data level, that would be great. So I prefer to leave the term single data space aside in order not to mix it up with, oh, we have common European data spaces, and then we also have one single common European data space, and what's all this?
Fair enough.
Yeah, I actually wanted to follow up on something that you mentioned, Johan, which I think is just to emphasize, because I think it's super relevant for, especially for the Earth observation sector and private sector, to understand that indeed you share this data under your conditions as a data owner. It's not like you share it there and then somebody can use it as they want. No, it can still be, as you said, it can be connected to your business model, meaning you still can receive money for that. You can have your pricing. So then I think it's important just to emphasize that in terms of clarifying how data spaces work for the private sector. But then here, with especially thinking about the private sector and not only maybe data providers, but here I would like to refer to added value service providers, because I think this is the part of our sector which mostly expressed their concerns about data spaces as such. And this is a big part of our sector. According to our recent industry survey, the one from 2023, it's 27% of our sector. So it's a really big part of it. And they see data space as a potential threat. So what's the threat? Because I know that during some of the workshops, especially let's say representatives more of the public bodies couldn't understand how data space can pose a threat to someone. So what's the threat? So so basically the concern is that if me as a added value service provider, I work with my data and on top of them I build a service, then if I share my raw data or like my entry level data, somebody else can build service on the top of that, or on the top of them too, and therefore create a competition for me. Let's say this is just let's say a paraphrase of what we really heard from the private sector. This is what was really expressed during the Expandio workshop in the anonymous voting. So it is perceived that way, and I'm just wondering, what's your response to that, guys? Maybe as Monica, maybe I will actually start with you this time, especially that you're working with the Earth observation sector and Earth observation data, not only in the Copernicus ecosystem, but before with previous platforms too.
Okay, so I would say that on a general level, you always have competition, so you just have to be better. But I think the data space is an opportunity to reach this critical mass, not to be very much afraid of small competition. If your service is efficient, complex, good enough, it will be very difficult to recreate it, even if you publish every code and you put it open source. So of course, there is always, we can always be afraid if we are small and if our market is small, if we don't have enough resources to grow, to develop. For me, the initiative of this common data market is exactly to help Europe and to help industry to grow and to build, to provide with some background tooling. Then sharing data, of course, it's not obligatory. Yes, it's voluntary. You can do it under your own rules and governance. This is why not one data space, but several data spaces for me, this Copernicus data space ecosystem, in fact, it should be something that will be used by several data spaces or service providers from several data spaces, from traffic to crisis management. We know the cases. So this is how I see it. This is so it is very important for Copernicus to be connected to the data spaces, to be able to use this common middleware or common interfaces to provide to help service developers to develop the value added, to be more efficient and use the data. I'm not sure if I've answered to your question.
No, that's good. I know we also discussed that before, and I think like I had this exchange with many of the stakeholders, some of those who are also at this EOcafe, because basically I think the answer here, if I can also paraphrase what you said, is that there's always a threat. That's always the risk with data, whichever data you use. However, the potential benefit coming from the data spaces is much higher, is greater than let's say the risk you're taking by sharing your data. I know, Johan, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that Monica said something very important. Sharing your data is voluntary. So indeed, it is really up to all the players in a data space where you will have the infrastructure and know the rules under which you will be able to function. If you would like to make data available as a data holder and share it under certain conditions with certain parties, be it raw data or process data, etc. So in the example that you gave, Veronica, the service provider that maybe fears that his or her product would suffer too much competition if some raw data that it has would be shared with other competitors, let's say, then I suppose that this data holder, this service provider, is not going to share that data, or only under certain very strict conditions and get something in return. The data spaces are really there, are being built, right? Let's say at a common European scale, in order to make as much data potentially available, not only the open data, but the closed data under certain conditions. And so this company that maybe has fears could also hopefully, or should look also at the potential benefits of acquiring very valuable data sets in order to improve even the service or the product that it already has on the market. So it's indeed the game of competition that is there. This is what the internal market is built on, and of course everybody knows that. But the data spaces should normally create additional possibilities in order to make better products, to be stronger, and you as a data holder decide precisely what you want to share or not. And so if this is considered to be too sensitive business data, for example, you would not share it, I suppose, or only under very strict conditions with a certain number of parties.
Yes, thank you very much. And then another aspect of sharing the data, and as you said, as Monica, for instance, you mentioned before, modeling on top of the data, and we already had a question regarding that in the chat, regarding not only raw data, but then what about processing the data, and what can you do the data spaces foresee something more on the top of just sharing the data? Will there be any other capabilities of really retrieving more value from the data, but just already work on them through the data spaces? Do you know, Johan, if from, I know for common European data space it's more complicated because it's multiple data spaces, so I don't know if you can give one answer, but maybe if you know of at least one of them, if they foresee such a thing.
Yeah, so thank you. So of course, in the data spaces, we will not only have data holders and data providers, but we will also have multiple data services that will be there in this space that come with additional possibilities like processing or curing or adding intelligence. There is this notion of data intermediaries, right, that can also add on all sorts of additional services in order you will bring the parties together, but in this free market you can also come with specific data services on top of that. So it's not only about sharing raw data or finalized products, it's in the whole value chain where you could offer your services, offer your competitive advantage, and being active in this data space, also in multiple roles, right? I mean, probably a lot of companies will potentially and also hopefully in practice be data providers at the same time data, let's say, users, that is to say, buying data or acquiring data under other circumstances from other parties. So it's really, being active on this kind of data market that is hopefully going to be facilitated thanks to a data space where you have the infrastructure and the set of rules under which that you can act.
Okay, thanks, Johan. I mean, I think that addresses, at least in part, the question that Volpart was asking. So I'm going to skip over that, and Emmanuel will come back to you a little bit later on. But Virginie Tassin has got a question about security and the security of the data. Virginie, do you want to join us? Virginie? No, okay. So
yes, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you now.
Hello, good evening.
Just in time.
Yeah, sorry, I was doing something else at the same time. Yes, I had a specific question with regards actually to the Copernicus Marine Service, where you actually can share, an open access specific type of data that could be related also to the state of the marine environment and could help actually to understand the state of marine resources. And basically this data is extremely useful in terms of, modeling, reporting, and implementing, obligations regarding the protection of the marine environments. But this could be also very sensitive with regards to specific marine resources for the states, because states are usually very keen on protecting certain type of key resources, including, for example, fisheries, where you have also very important private interests. So I was wondering if this dimension of the relationship between economy and security actually could be a bit more explained. Have you been thinking about it already, or is it too specific to the marine environment? Thank you.
I think it's not specific to the marine, if I can start. It's not specific to the marine. It's a valid question for a lot of data or information, because we are talking about information. But this is what will have to be in governance and data sharing policy, or making data available for each service and for each data being made available on a voluntary basis, and data being available according to a set of rules. This is why it is so important to have this good, validation, identification, traceability service, to have that the right person or organization gets access to the true data. This is about trust between the parties of the data space. I suppose that Johan also wants to comment on it.
Thank you, Monica. Well, I can only, let's say, underline what you already said. And in the data space, of course, from the infrastructure point of view, there will be, of course, all sorts of technical elements, that should make sure that you are able to share your data in a trustful, in a secure, in a privacy-preserving way, which is why in the development of the common European data spaces, the various sectoral or domain specific data spaces like CRATE, where IRSC is a party, but also by the Data Spaces Support Center that has been set up. They are all working out a blueprint architecture that takes into account, for example, also these elements in important building blocks with, access and usage rights, with identity management and trust. And on the governance point, from the governance point of view, let's say the EU activities that have been taken there, and then I refer, let's say, mainly now to the DGA, the Data Governance Act. There is, let's say, some legal dispositions put in place that tries to enhance trust for data transactions in general. For example, again, by creating a framework of neutral data intermediaries, where you can then know in a trustful way that this data intermediary is there bringing, the data users and the data holders together, but is completely neutral, meaning is only doing that and is not at the same time, taking advantage of the data that you would be making available using that data intermediary, for example. The other way, trust has to be dealt with, of course, from an infrastructure technical point of view, but also from the governance rules point of view. If you allow me, Veronica and Geoff, my eye falls on a remark. Where is it again? Because in the meantime, so in the chat of Gianmocco Martirano, that is referring to the Inspire conference where I was present as well, and Veronica as well, right? Indeed, of course, Inspire and the lessons learned, very important. So you were there then, Gianmocco, you followed it as well. And you see that this, let's say, the Inspire community and everything that goes with it, with the review of the Inspire directive and the Green Data for All initiative, really tries to build also on this current building of the common European data spaces, and learn the lessons from the past and see also how this can fit into these common European data spaces. So I just want to underline what you wrote in the chat. Very important indeed.
But then, indeed, as you mentioned, I think it also refers to what you said before, that it's okay that we're creating multiple data spaces specific for every sector, because then in the end it's much easier to implement at the moment than having this enormous endless project starting now. So of course it makes sense that we're starting with these smaller ones. But does it mean that then what do you think about this multiplication of data space? What I'm referring to is that many sectors, and I'm talking also about Earth observation and different parts of our sector, the whole space sector as such, there are ideas of having their own geospatial data, space data, Earth observation data spaces, and I'm wondering, how do you see that? What do you think as being involved in the development of data spaces, which are, and as Monica, data space ecosystem, how do you then see such initiatives, and how do you see then potential interoperability with them, or how do you see such a landscape?
Yeah, I think you said the key word, right? Interoperability. But let's first say that I think it's very good. First of all, I think that if data spaces are being created in all sorts of sectors at various levels, maybe it shows that the concept and the idea of bringing together an infrastructure and a governance mechanism is something that convinces, where a lot of players say, yeah, this is important, this is useful, and we can do that in a smaller setting or in a bigger setting, etc., etc. So that's one thing. The other thing is, if we want to get at this, if we want to arrive at this vision that we have set out in the European data strategy and really have an internal market, right, for data, then of course we're not getting there if we only have 14 initiatives. That's absolutely impossible. However, indeed, as you said, with the keyword interoperability, all these initiatives would need to be connected in a way in order to form this global infrastructure, if I may say so, with the different sets of governance mechanisms on top of that. Again, you know, my simple image of the roads, you know, they have been built at all sorts of various levels, etc. And at a certain point in time, you know, they got connected, you know, locally, regionally, nationally, and at European level and beyond. So really, I see this a bit in the same way, and it might sound simplistic maybe, but this is really what I would say is like the same kind of logic. Now, in order, of course, to try to ensure that there is consistency, a certain amount of consistency, for the specific common European data initiatives that have been launched by the Commission with the data strategy, with the Digital Europe program, with an action such as GREAT, the preparatory action for the Green Deal data space, of course, we try already to bring that consistency, because and there a main player, of course, is the Data Spaces Support Center that has been set up exactly for that reason. You know, Veronica, that the great CSA is cooperating with the Data Spaces Support Center, and through that with all the other sectoral data space initiatives that have been launched. The Data Spaces Support Center is trying to look at a sector agnostic level. What are the important elements for a common European data space to be developed, if you do that in a consistent way, and of course allow for interoperability, there's a lot to be done there. You could hopefully get that connection easier. In this context, I should maybe mention that apart from the Data Spaces Support Center, as part of the Digital the Data Governance Act, sorry, there is the European Data Innovation Board that has been set up and that will meet in a few weeks. That is also going to look at important aspects of standards, interoperability, cross-sectoral interoperability in the context of the development of the data spaces. So yeah, interoperability, a key word, in order for all these great initiatives that are out there, and for which a certain also, of course, started before the European data strategy, for all that to be gradually connected and lead to this internal data market.
Yeah, Monica, if you want to comment and maybe to complement this question as well, is how do you guys, as Copernicus Data Space Ecosystem, address the concept of interoperability and your connection with other data spaces?
This is what I want to add, that on our modest scale, one emerging, in fact, or being built data space is still ecosystem. We already welcome other actors. There is a special button, you can join the ecosystem, not yet the data space, because data space is question, more technical question of the future, where you can ask and you can become a member. So and we will of course propose as those first level of interoperability. So the ecosystem will be open for federation, probably the identity federation to start with. So this is the really very first level, because ecosystem is not only about access to the data, but also a little bit about access to the market. Yes, to exchange, to see each other, about discover, to make your data and your services discoverable. So federation of identities, and then at the next step, federation of, let's call it catalog, even if it's maybe a bit too narrow. So those are our first stages on our roadmap, and we will continue following the evolution of and maturity of data spaces and what will be proposed.
Thank you very much. And then I would like to discuss further, because of course we had so many other topics to discuss. 1 hour is not enough to discuss data spaces, even just the two. But I wanted to because I think maybe I would just mention that on behalf of GREAT, but also other common European data spaces, that indeed it's in progress, as Johan said. And I think what is important is that there is the moment now to interact with them, to contribute, to say what is needed, how to be a part of these data spaces. And I think that's because we're talking about the future timeline, where it's not just some of them are being deployed now, so there is still space, that's a good word, space to interact with the data spaces and shape them the way you want them to work for you and serve you. So I think this is something I want to mention as for the future perspective. And another thing I wanted to mention as for the future perspective, but I also see that it has been mentioned several times in the chat, is a space data space. Which is at the moment a concept, an idea, which has been already discussed with interested stakeholders. I think it was last week, time flies, it feels like it was a month ago, but it was just last week in Madrid, where we brainstormed a little bit on what could be space data space, what could be its role, and if we need one. And I hope that Emmanuel Mondon, you're still with us, and maybe you could, because I could see a few of your comments, so maybe if you could step in and join and maybe say just a few words about the vision and the idea behind space data space. And I think I can see you almost. Yes, now I can see you.
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks, Veronica. Indeed, we had a space data space workshop last week. Veronica was attending, a colleague from Monica as well, plus a number of very different people from DG Connect, DG Office, SPA, industry, NGOs, and so on and so forth. The idea is the following. As I wrote in the chat, data sharing initiative, being GAIX, being Common Open Data Spaces, being any other, are extremely interesting for us, the Earth observation sector, but even the space sector, for supporting the real world economy. Because for the finance sector, the agriculture sector, the health sector, they don't know space at all. And they don't know that space could help them in their daily operations. So these data sharing initiatives are key because per sector, stakeholders are joining forces for sharing data because they have understood that if they are sharing their data with others, and data we should consider resources. It's not only data, it could be algorithm, processing, services. So if they are sharing their resources with others, they will get for themselves much more benefits than if they are doing alone. So they are eager to share their resources and they are open to access to third-party resources. Can you believe that someone is eager to access to third-party resources, even resources derived, or let's call it information, derived from Earth observation, space, stakeholders? And that's where the uniqueness is lying. It is an enormous opportunity for us to provide the information they need, bankers, farmers, doctors, and so on and so forth. And we can support across the board the various data spaces. Johan was mentioning 14 common European data spaces. I'm pretty sure in one way or another, space and even Earth observation could support all of them, but in a very different mindset. As I wrote, it's not technology push, it's use case driven. So we need to understand that we will not provide 100% of the solution. We may provide 5% of the solution for one use case. We may provide 50% of the solution for another use case of the value chain. But the market is much, much bigger than whatever project we could provide with 100% of the solution. So there is an enormous opportunity for all of us. And I'm super pleased that EOSC is having in a couple of months 2 times this EOcafe on that. There is one point to be clear. Is data space an opportunity? Yes, if we are joining forces. Because if with other space guys, because if on Monday, Earth observation is claiming to the outside world, Earth observation will save the world. On Tuesday, telecommunication, same story, will save the world. On Wednesday, navigation will save the world. At the end of the week, the banker or whomever outside of the Adam space family, we are very well all together, but we are not realizing that everybody else is afraid of us. All these guys, they will say, space guys, Earth observation guys, navigation guys, telecommunication guys, thanks, but I have plenty of other things to do. And I'm not able, and I have no time to understand what you are explaining to me. So it is a real opportunity for us if we are joining forces. I'm stopping here.
Thank you very much, and I think a nice message. As we're getting to the end of the EOcafe slowly, how do we manage that? Because of course I have still a million questions. Well, audience too.
The key question is to Johan and Monica if they're pressed to finish, or if we can overrun a little bit. What do you think?
One question. I can choose the coolest one.
We'll in any case have an open session at the end where it's even more of a free for all. But go ahead with your question.
Oh, which one will be the coolest? What do you think? Okay.
A large selection here. I've got to choose them.
But I think so my question now will be from, let's say, as EOSC, from the Earth observation sector perspective. What then the companies should follow? Which maybe data space they should focus on? Maybe there is an upcoming initiative they should keep track of, be aware of, and then if there is anything that they already can do to be prepared to be a part of data spaces. On here.
I think, yeah, sorry, go, sorry.
No, please, Monica, sorry.
Well, I would say they have to follow the evolution, check the informations. They can, Emmanuel spoke about space data space. We, as at Copernicus data space ecosystem, we also have already a place where you can say, yes, I am interested, I want to follow. I would just say that there is no, I think that there is no escape from data spaces right now. So we will be in it whether we want it or not. So better want it and prepare. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Monica.
That sounds a bit like a threat, but I hope that it's not considered so much as a threat, and I'm sure that Monica doesn't mean it like that. No, it's just that it's indeed something that is really happening out there everywhere, and so let's hope that it means that it's a positive development. And of course, since this creates a lot of opportunities, potentially at least, it's important that your stakeholders are part of that endeavor. Now, Veronica, you said again something important. We are at the beginning of this process. So I just wanted to very briefly say that for the common European data spaces, like the great preparatory action for the Green Deal data space, indeed, we are really at the start, where for a number of sectoral data spaces like agriculture, like mobility, like skills, preparatory actions like the great project have just finished or will finish in a few months. And what is a preparatory action? I don't know to what extent the whole community knows great, Veronica, but it's really preparing the important elements that would need to be part of this sectoral or domain-specific data space. So looking at this blueprint architecture, looking at the priority data sets, trying to elaborate a roadmap, what needs to be done, working on the first important elements of this so-called governance framework. So preparatory work that then of course will need to be taken up by one or several deployment actions. And just to stay close to great EARSC, and so the Green Deal data space, which is I think one of the more important, or naturally maybe closer to this community as one of the sectoral or domain specific data spaces. It would be important that you follow these developments. So you would be following it. I would tend to say in two ways. So first of all, if you want to know more about the Green Deal data space preparations, please contact EARSC. Please go to the great website where they reach out, where they explain what they are doing and ask for your feedback. Are important things missing? How far are we? What are the follow-up actions specifically for the Green Deal data space endeavor? Then there is, of course, the Data Spaces Support Center. I posted a link in the chat. Why? Because the Data Spaces Support Center, again, is trying to follow the developments at a global level, but also because it allows you an entry to the other sectoral data spaces, because they have a whole page on their network of stakeholders with the different sectoral data space initiatives. So if you say, it's nice, the Green Deal, but I'm also very interested in agriculture and in manufacturing, you could go there and you will be, you see what project, what community is working on that particular sectoral data space. And if you wouldn't be able to find it, of course, you contact the Data Spaces Support Center and they will be able to point you to it. We are really in the phase with this creation, with the preparation, and your feedback, your input in these preparatory steps is already very important. And of course, it allows you to see also, where do we stand with a certain data space. Cultural heritage data space may be a bit less interesting for you, maybe not, by the way, but of course, this one is much more mature because it's based on something that has existed for several years called Europeana, and where the deployment is already in place. But still, a lot of work to be done, but it allows you to see the various elements of the sectoral data spaces. I'll stop here.
No, I think that's it's really interesting opportunity. Hugo's got a nice point just in the chat. But I said at the beginning that we had two very welcome but unexpected guests in Jean and Franz, and I just want to give them the opportunity if they have a question at all, because they're sort of sitting a little bit remote from the conversation. Franz, did you want to ask something of Johan or Monica?
Pondering now while I'm sitting here behind the camera, so you can't see me.
Yeah, it's a voice from the wilderness.
So you said, Johan, so data space as an infrastructure and a set of rules. And I was wondering, these set of rules, how and who is gonna define them, and when are they being defined, and to what extent are they already, or is this what the GREAT project is currently doing, or to what extent are they already there? So
yeah, thank you.
Very important that the people who are actually supposed to provide data into this data space are probably co-design this set of rules. And how do you do this?
Your hand's nodding.
Exactly, I'm nodding. So yeah, indeed. Thanks for the question. Very important again, because it allows me to underline that the data spaces have to be driven by the stakeholders. That it's no use for a European Commission, for example, to kind of top-down impose a data space that nobody believes in and that is not going to be populated by the necessary participant actors, companies, public administrations, etc. And therefore, it is, I would say, this community, for example, that would need to co-decide or give its input on how this governance structure should look like. So I don't know if Veronica wants to elaborate on it from the specific Green Deal perspective, but let's say for the Green Deal data space preparations, GREAT has looked into the aspect of, okay, what are the important elements for this governance framework to be created for the Green Deal data space? How could that look like, or should that look like? What are the important elements? Again, we're at the very beginning, and therefore what they, let's say, have concluded and are proposing would benefit from your feedback, from your input. This is the right way to go. This is absolutely important, or no, this is maybe something that should be corrected, etc. The same thing again goes for the Data Spaces Support Center. I think it is important, and I hope that Veronica can confirm that, to see that the various sectoral data space initiatives need to work hand in hand with the Data Spaces Support Center, because of course they are looking at the same kind of issues, but from a different perspective. The various great projects, so the sectoral data space initiatives, focus on the specificities and the sensitivities of the sector or the domain, etc. Whereas the Data Spaces Support Center tries to distill, what are important elements, including governance aspects that would be important for any kind of data space, independent from the sector or the domain. And lastly, an important aspect still of governance structure for any kind of data space is what, let's say, we as a European Commission have put forward and are complementing with the European legislation on data. So the Data Governance Act, the Data Act, but complementing the Free Flow of Data Directive, the GDPR, etc., because that is, let's say, a European legislative how to say, building block, if I may say so, which is part of the general data governance framework. But then again, the stakeholders in the different sectoral and domain-specific data spaces, they would need to elaborate on that in order to come to this framework, governance framework. So that is still work ahead, where hopefully you, everybody interested in a certain data space, would participate in. Veronica, do you want to add on that?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Thank you very much, Johan, for mentioning that, because indeed. So at the moment in GREAT, we defined it was already a few months ago, but we find our initial visions for the technical blueprints, the governance, and high priority data sets. So it's already available on our website. Of course, it's especially the governance one. It's an enormous report, of course, because it's a lot of aspects for the data space. But I think what is important is that, first of all, it's an initial version. It's the first version that we did after less than a year of our work. We're working on the second version, but I think that even what we're discussing today at the GREAT meeting is that we can define kind of pathways at the moment. But then, of course, when we go to the deployment and we start working with the data space and with the community related to this particular data space, that also what implies the governance and the data sources that are a part of and data sets that are a part of the data space. So of course it will differ. So even though I'm inviting everybody to go to these reports and check our deliverables and comment upon that, I don't think you're going to find there one clear answer to that, because of course it's just exploring ideas at the moment.
Absolutely. So just to say, we don't have that answer yet. This is something in preparation. It's a very complex aspect and is something that needs to be developed gradually with important participation and input of the stakeholders of that data space. So yeah, work in progress, I'd say.
So one or two people have already left us, and we have overrun a fair bit. We always try to keep it fairly flexible, and as we say, there is a sort of an open part. So if you want to carry on talking, don't go away. You can, come still join us. But I will close sort of the formal part of the EOcafe at this point. Thank you very much, Johan and Monica, for being with us. It was great to return to the subject of it's that word again, isn't it? You can't avoid it. Great. To return to the subject of data spaces, and from what's been said, I imagine we shall come back again in a few months' time and look further at the progress and what's going on. So, Emmanuel, you're very welcome to encourage us there. Special thank to my co-host this time, to Veronica. I mean, it was a very interesting and a very positive experience to have a co-host. So I think it's something we'll probably do again in the future. And thank you all for coming along. I think it's been a very interesting EOcafe. The next one will be in 2 weeks' time, as usual. It will be the last one of the year, and we're returning to the subject returning to another subject, the subject of Cassini. I think it's about 18 months since the program was launched. Maybe it's a little bit more. But there've been some awards made, some success stories, and so we want to come back to Cassini to learn about the status, to focus on at least one of the success stories that's come out of it. So that's what we'll be talking about in 2 weeks' time. So. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for people, so it will be an interesting discussion for everybody. So thank you very much again for joining us, Johan, Monica, Veronica, and see you next time.